Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a top 16 breakdown for the TAC Games webcam regionals for the One Piece card game that happened this past weekend. So real quick, I do want to thank TAC Games for running the event, as well as for the double sleeve team for not only getting the deck list, but also for streaming the event, and they're going to be re-uploading it to their YouTube channel. Highly recommend checking them out and dropping a follow there. Friends of the channel for sure, and thank you again for supplying that content. So going into this top 16 again, this was a pretty big weekend for this card game, since we did have essentially events all over the world taking place at the same time for it. So this is for the Oceania, and for this event we do have this top 16 where there's 6 Zoros, 4 Kinemons, with one of them taking the event, 3 Newgates, 2 Kaidos, and a Smoker as well. And so honestly, like, these 3 I think are the kind of big 3 for this format, and we're seeing them get a lot of tops for the events that we've seen already. Kaido is a newer one, at least for me to see in this format, and Smoker's kind of just hanging out there. They are getting the occasional top here and there, but definitely not on the same level, I'd say, as the 3 here as well. So we're going to check out the top placing list for each one of these leaders, and we're going to start off with these first place lists. And starting off, we have Jonathan Maurer's first place Kinemon list, and we've been seeing a lot of Kinemon do very well in this event, and not only this event, but all of the events pretty much that have been happening this past weekend. It's a very strong leader, not necessarily for the late game potential, which I think Eustace Kid is still better in that way a lot of the time. However, the early game potential for this leader is very, very strong. Being able to play Okiku on turn 2 or Yamato on turn 2, depending if you're going second or first, or sorry, Okiku on turn 1 or Yamato on turn 2, depending if you're going first or second, I think is very, very strong for this deck. And it's just kind of like that. You get this a lot of advantage early game, but again, like, once you have more than 2 cards on the board, you don't get that reduction, which kind of stinks in a lot of ways. But I think it does kind of balance out how the deck works and what you do with it. But I also think, like, again, you have to make that decision, right? I think that Kinemon is very strong. Again, early game removal, there's a lot of ways to suspend or rest your opponent's cards very easily, and so if you're able to do that, they can't really set up that much. But then if they do set up in late game, you don't have a lot of defenses unless you really kind of tech into it, which the 7-drop Usus Kids are pretty useful for that. I do like the Odin though. Odin is just like a really great card for this deck to be a finisher, especially with the lack of inherent double attack with this leader compared to Usus Kid. I think that's something that's very important. So honestly, I think the leader is very good. It's going to be seeing a lot of play, but I do think a lot of people will maybe try to go back to Eustace Kid and realize that the leader, after like turn 4, like 3 or 4, usually doesn't get a lot of procs unless your opponent's doing just as hard on the board control aspect, and missing out on that double attack might be you're missing it a little bit. So I'm really curious on there, but not anything too crazy. Just a lot of the standard attacks of the double of the Odin, or not the Odin, the Wano Country and the Bonnie package, just so you have some early game ways to find advantage. They definitely want to remove these anyways, so you do get that advantage there. And then just traditional, being able to use the rest of your cards to get a lot of good rests and attacking over and making it really hard for your opponent to really establish anything on board. So congrats to Jonathan on their finish there. And next up we have our second place. This is Alan Liu's Kaido, which again, I haven't seen any North American events that have a Kaido that's topped. We've seen pretty much only Carta. There may have been one for the PPG event that happened this weekend too, but this is using a lot of like the new Impel Down cards, especially since they do have a 1-drop searcher, which is almost just good enough in itself for it to be run in this deck, right? Being able to play this on turn 1 to not only potentially draw a card, which could be a 2K, which could be a blocker, which could be a 2K, which could be an event card that's really strong at preventing your opponent from attacking a lot. All of this is very good for what it is. Like, this can stop 2 attacks, can even stop like 3 attacks if something has more than 1 swing, which is really great. And it's just a very good kind of control card for a deck like this. So I think Kaido is in a weird spot. It got like, you can use the new archetype, which is interesting, but it's not as strong as I don't know. I think it's lost a little bit. It's definitely a lot of still having to find your pieces at the right turn. And there's also like no 10-drop, or there's only the 10-drop Kaido. There's not the 9-drop Kaido. It's a little bit interesting too, but I think this deck is strong. I think it does do a lot of stuff still, and you just have to kind of be a little bit. It's just so reactive, right? If you know what your opponents are doing, if you know how to respond to them, you're going to be doing very well. It's the beginning of the format, so that's a little bit tricky to do right now. But when you get more information and you're more used to the format, I do expect to see a little bit more Kaido than what we've been seeing. but we'll see if that's true or not. But congrats to Alan for their finish there. And next up we have Kristina, who is playing a Newgate, and there's kind of two different builds for Newgate. There's like the Straw Hat build as well as the build for the Moby Dick, the stage card, which is getting banned in set 3, is banned in set 3. We'll see when it's hits the rest of the world, but this is not running that card anyways. It's the Straw Hat build where you're just kind of an aggressive deck that just happens to be a 6k leader, which on offense and defense, having a 6k leader is fantastic. And something else too, like if you're playing something more aggressive like Zoro, a lot of the time like people aren't attacking into your life to give you less resources, and so you just kind of don't have a lot of cards to deal with. Newgate lets you draw a card every turn. It's at the end of your turn and it's from your life, but being able to have all those more resources is fantastic for a deck like this. And you're just able to play a lot of things on curve. You're able to play a lot of big bodies like these guys that are a lot of really hard to get over. And in general, if they want to try to establish their board and pressure you, they have to use at least one extra Dawn every turn, which is great because this is a 6k leader. So I think the deck is strong. It's going to be continuing to see some play, and this is definitely a leader that I was expecting to do as well as it has been, and it's been doing super duper well. So congrats to Kristina for their finish here. And next we do have a Zoro. So very, very strong deck. Obviously it's in 4th place. This is Joel's 4th place list for it, and honestly, a lot of these are looking very similar. I've been looking at a lot of Zoro lists lately. There are some decision points, specifically what 1-drops we run and how many of them. This is running all of the 1-drops. We have 4 of Otama, Makino, Nami's, Magra, Gordon, and the Sunny Kun. All of these being run at 4 copies. That's a lot. So your Curly Dadan should never, ever miss, and I doubt it ever does. So that's very strong. This is such a good card for a lot of red decks. Just the fact that this lets you draw a card is insane. Like this, there's so little cycle, and the fact that red has 2k 1-drop red cards that are 2k counters is great. Or it can find another searcher, which is really good. For 3 Dawn, you just draw 2 cards, and again, this searches Nami, and then Nami just finds pretty much all the good cards in the deck as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how much, if there's any changes to Zoro, but it's just great. It's just so much economy. You don't have to worry about your opponent hitting into your life, because guess what? You're still drawing cards anyways. Vista's a really good card, and being able to pump up all these bodies that you want to be playing for value anyways to pressure your opponent is strong in the same way. So if you consider like each one of these 1-drops is like an attack that forces a card out of your opponent's hands, and the fact that you're drawing as much as you are when you're doing it, it really, really starts to add up all of a sudden. So I don't know. Zoro's pretty prevalent. You're going to see a lot of it. You have opinions on it already, but there we go. So congrats to Joel. And then lastly, we do have our 11th place list. This is Kenny's Smoker, and Smoker's been very interesting. I've actually been really liking it the more I play it. I thought it was not super good. I thought the effect was pretty bad, but it comes up a lot more than I thought it would, and having just like a 7k swing is good for what it is, and sometimes like reducing the 1 does make a difference. So it is flexible, and just the fact that you are a black leader with 5 life does make a lot of difference for this as well, and I think that helps it out, because it's really tough for some of these multicolor leaders at times, because there's just a lot of power and aggressive coming out of not only the Zoros, but I think the Newgates at the same time. So but this deck just has so much removal and so much defense kind of available to you. Kuzans, both of them are very good for you. The Borsalino blocker is fantastic for what it does. Impact Wave, I think, is the best 2-drop counter or 2-cost event counter in the game. This can like get rid of 2 things, which is very strong. And you really can't play around this. Like for Red Hawk, you can just pump something up above 4K. But for this, it's just like, well, you can't really increase the cost of your cards. So like this is great. And even the trigger off security as like a mini version of like, sometimes like even a better version of a Gum Gum Jet Pistol. Like this card does it all. It's one of the cards I think that lets black be as defensive as it is, because it gets so much value. So Kuzan at 3. Honestly, in Smoker, I find less and less need for Kuzan. I don't think it's wrong to not have him at times, just because you have to give up your entire turn to play this Kuzan, and sometimes that's just honestly not worth it. And if you never find the time to play it, it's just a card that's dead in your hand the entire game, right? So I think it's something that if you're running 3 or 2 copies, and if that's how many Kuzans you own, that's totally fine. I honestly think you can play Smoker without Kuzan and still do very, very well with it, because there's just sometimes that you just don't have time to play it, and you still could do well. Like Sakazuki's kind of does the same thing, but it does it for 6, which is a little bit more manageable for what it does, and I think that's strong too. So this is list the 11th place list by Kenny. Again, congrats to Kenny there, and that's going to be the breakdown for us today. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to check out the event page on my website in the description below, and look forward to more top 16 breakdowns as we go more into this Paramount War meta. So that's going to be it for me again. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.